It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
The history of mankind's fascination with the moon goes as far back as the earliest of arts, but never had this fascination and wondrous longing for a distant celestial object been better reflected in art than with the advent of cinema. In 1902, Georges Méliès made a trip to the moon, an early science fiction spectacle that tells the tale of a group of astronomers traveling to a sentient moon, teeming with life in a cannon propelled capsule. The shot of their landing on the eye of the moon is considered historically iconic in the whole of cinema. Méliès's innovative use of editing and special effects in the film set a benchmark for its time and influenced many upcoming film artists as well as further pushing for innovations in a cinematic medium. Even one of the earliest films is a documentation of a rare astronomical event from 1874, a chronophotographic sequence of Venus transiting over the face of the Sun. With the development of space research and engineering, the distance between the Earth and the Moon have grown shorter. The Moon isn't as far nowadays as it once was. The dream of going to the Moon left the fictional world of cinema and soon became a reality.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
On the day of July 16, 1969, a spacecraft named Apollo 11 carried the first three travelers to walk on a destination where no one ever dwelt before in the history of mankind, seen and known as the Moon. And 4 days later, the commander of Apollo 11, Neil Armstrong, became the first human who stepped on the lunar surface. 19 minutes later, he was joined by pilot Buzz Aldrin. The first walk of these two men on the surface of the moon was witnessed live by almost 65 crore live viewers across the world who committed themselves in front of their TV screens just to see the history being created. The journey of man to moon was not only 4 days long but took 8 whole years. The purpose to explore lunar surface was not general curiosity towards extraterrestrial subjects but born out of deep political clashes of two massively powerful nations. The seeds of these clashes were planted in the year 1947 when tension between United States of America and Soviet Union resulted into Cold War. 8 years later, in 1955, they chose the territory of outer space as their new battlefield that nowadays remembered as space race. The Soviet Union had significant achievements in space exploration as well. USSR launched the first artificial satellite Sputnik 1 in 1957 and 4 years later they successfully sent the first human Yuri Gagarin in space. This incident fueled the fire of USA. After losing the opportunity to send the first human into space, America became determined to wave the American flag on the moon before USSR. Kennedy stood before Congress on May 25, 1961, and proposed that the US should commit itself to achieve the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth. Since then, moon became an important field of interest for both the nations and even for the entire world. When the eyes of everyone else were fixed on the space race between the two superpowers, another nation, not as powerful or developed as the USA or USSR, was on its way to enter the space. In the year 1962, Indian Prime Minister Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, observing the space programs of other countries and understanding the need of space research and science technology for India as well, passed a scientific policy resolution in the parliament to encourage scientific advancements in the country. Nehru assigned the task of space research and outer space exploration to the Department of Atomic Energy, which at the time was led by India's senior nuclear physicist Homi J. Bhabha. In the same year, Bhabha established Indian National Committee for Space Research in COSPAR under the chairmanship of famous Indian physicist Vikram Sarabhai, who is also known as the father of Indian space program. At that time, the committee was part of Tata Institute of Fundamental Research and took over the responsibilities of the Department of Atomic Energy in Space Science and Research. Further, Sarabhai took the decision to set up Thumba Equatorial Rocket Launching Station (TERLS) at Thumba coastal area of Thiruvananthapuram city. Soon, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, who later became the President of India, joined in COSPAR, and new chapter of space research and advancement were going to be added in the Book of India. Though the community had been formed, but it was only a minor step in a journey that was miles long. It was just a year after INCOSPAR was formed in 1963, India was about to launch its first ever rocket. The sounding rocket, meant for probing the upper atmosphere, was launched from the TERLS in the fishing village of Thumba, Kerala, now known as the Vikram Sarabhai Space Center. Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, who was part of the project, said that INCOSPAR had to acquire land from a local church and relocate the villagers before preparations could begin. Then they had to move the rocket components using an old bicycle. Eventually, on November 21, 1963, they launched the rocket in the presence of Dr. Homi Bhabha. With the launch of the first rocket, India showed the entire world that we were also on the verge of conquering the skies. The Committee for Space Research may have started without any difficulty, but it turned out to be a challenge to run it smoothly. In the initial days, our country was facing many financial and geopolitical problems after the Indochina War of 1962. Infrastructure and resources were limited, and the workforce was untrained and unexperienced. Despite of such problems, the enthusiasm of Sarabhai resulted in the progress of INCOSPAR. In 1964, the Tokyo Olympics were transmitted live across the Pacific by Syncom-3, which was an American satellite. Sarabhai took inspiration from it to set up the Experimental Satellite Communication Earth Station (Khess) in Ahmedabad. He wrote in his paper Television for Development, "We should consciously reach the most difficult and least developed areas of the country, and because they are in this state, reach them in a hurry." And there was no better way to do this than satellite television. The Indian TV program Krishi Darshan, launched in 1967, was a part of this initiative. Krishi Darshan became the longest running television series in India, which still airs on DD Kisan TV channel. On 15th August 1969, 25 days after the Apollo 11's landing on Moon, a major event occurred and ISRO was formed. It superseded INCOSPAR with an expanded role to harness space technology. Later on, Department of Science and Technology was formed and operations of ISRO were shifted from Department of Atomic Research to Department of Science and Technology. When it seemed that progress of ISRO would take some pace, an unfortunate incident struck the whole nation. On December 30, the father of Indian space program, Dr. Vikram Sarabhai, suffered a cardiac arrest and left the world at the age of 52. The death of Sarabhai left the responsibilities of ISRO on the shoulders of Kalam. Yet, the position of ISRO's chairmanship was succeeded by Professor M.G.K. Menon for a short term and then by Professor Satish Dhawan for next 12 years. In that period, ISRO achieved many significant milestones. India collaborated with Soviet Union under the Soviet Interkosmos program, which provided access to space for friendly states, and launched Aryabhat, India's first satellite using a Cosmos 3 launch vehicle. Afterwards, ISRO developed its own launch vehicle, SLV, to launch satellites on their own without relying on some other country. The first time when SLV was used was in 1979. For an experimental flight proved to be a failure. But the following year, ISRO was successful in sending RS-1 or Rohini Satellite 1 into space using the same satellite launch vehicle and became the 7th country in the world to be capable of undertaking orbital launches. In the next 3 decades, ISRO emerged as one of the leading space organizations. From sending the first Indian citizen to space to developing its own navigation satellite system, Navik, ISRO was giving a tough competition to other space organizations internationally.
विज्ञान के क्षेत्र में भारत एक ऊंची उड़ान लेने के लिए तैयार है मुझे ये बताने में बड़ी खुशी हो रही है कि भारत चंद्रमा पर अपना अंतरिक्ष यान भेजेगा. इसका नाम होगा चंद्रयान प्रथम.
With this independence speech of 2003, Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee told the world about India's next big space mission, the Chandrayaan. After reaching the high skies, ISRO's next aim was the moon. If succeeded, the mission would prove a major boost to India's space program. The idea of an Indian scientific mission to the moon was first raised in 1999 during a meeting of the Indian Academy of Sciences. The Astronomical Society of India (ASI) carried forward the idea in 2000. Soon after, ISRO set up the National Lunar Mission Task Force, which concluded that ISRO has the technical expertise to carry out an Indian mission to the moon. In April 2003, over 100 famous and respected Indian scientists discussed and approved the task for recommendation to launch an Indian probe to the moon. 6 months later, the Indian government gave approval for the mission. The main objectives behind the Chandrayaan mission were chemical and mineralogical mapping of the entire lunar surface at high spatial resolution, mapping of chemical elements like aluminium, silicon, calcium, iron, magnesium, uranium, thorium, radon, and titanium with the intention to increase the scientific knowledge and to test the impact of a subsatellite on the surface of moon for future soft landing missions. It was expected from Chandrayaan to take high-resolution mineralogical and chemical imaging of shadowed north and south polar regions with the search of surface or subsurface lunar water ice, especially at those poles. Chandrayaan 1 was assembled and completed during the year 2008, and it consisted a total of 11 instruments, in which 5 were made in India while the other 6 were foreign instruments. The Indian instruments consisted a terrain mapping camera to map the topography of moon, a hyperspectral imager, a lunar laser ranging instrument, a high energy AJ gamma X-ray spectrometer, and a moon impact probe. With all these instruments, the final weight of Chandrayaan 1 was 1380 kg at the launch. The main source of power was going to be the solar energy which the Chandrayaan would receive through its solar panel that covered area of 2.15 meter by 1.8 meter, generating 750 watt of peak power. The date to launch Chandrayaan 1 was scheduled on 22nd October of 2008. At the day of launch, the fingers of entire nation were crossed and tension was even visible on the faces inside the control room. It was an anxious moment. The countdown began. The world was watching. India was only one launch away from writing the history. And exactly at 0052 UTC or 6:22 am according to Indian time, Chandrayaan 1 was launched from Satish Dhawan Space Center using ISRO's PSLV C-11 launch vehicle. The takeoff was indeed a success. After the launch, the Chandrayaan was not directly sent towards the moon as it would require a lot of power. To reduce the energy consumption, the popular slingshot method was used. Slingshot method or gravity assist maneuver uses Earth's own gravity to impart enough velocity to the spacecraft to shoot off to the moon. In simple words, gravity acts as rocket fuel. Following this slingshot method, Chandrayaan orbited the Earth for 21 days in 5 orbits to launch the craft on a direct trajectory to the moon. On 8th of November, Chandrayaan 1 entered the lunar orbit, and after 6 days, the moon impact probe ejects from the Chandrayaan and performs a hard landing near the lunar south pole, making ISRO the 5th national space agency to reach the lunar surface. The same impact probe made a significant discovery by recording the evidence of water in 650 mass spectra readings before the impact on lunar surface. Chandrayaan 1 orbited the moon for 10 months and 6 days before losing the contact. The overall mission gave a boost to India's space research towards moon.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
इस समय आप अपनी स्क्रीन पर देख रहे हैं 2 S-200 रॉकेट
Plus 5 seconds.
दोनों का प्रज्वलन हो गया है और उससे 640 टन वाले मार्क 3 रॉकेट नौगन को ऊपर की ओर लेके जा रहे हैं.
A decade after the Chandrayaan 1 mission, its successor Chandrayaan 2 was launched. This time, more advancements were added in the new Chandrayaan in comparison to its older version. The aim of Chandrayaan 2 was not only to orbit Earth's natural satellite but to land softly on its surface, and for the process, it consisted a lunar orbiter, a lander, a rover, whereas Chandrayaan 1 only had an orbiter and an impactor. The journey of Chandrayaan 2 was full of troubles and delays. The first step towards the development of Chandrayaan 2 was taken in the year 2007 by the representatives of Roscosmos, the Russian Space Agency, and ISRO, who signed an agreement in which the two space organizations will work together on the Chandrayaan 1's follow-up project. ISRO took the prime responsibility for the orbiter and rover, while Roscosmos would provide the lander. The mission was approved by Indian government in 2008, chaired by PM Manmohan Singh. The work began, and the design of the spacecraft was completed in August 2009. The engineers of ISRO completed their work on the given schedule and developed the payload for Chandrayaan 2, but the mission had to be postponed in January 2013 and got rescheduled to 2016 because Russia was unable to develop the lander on time. The reason of this delay was the failure of Russia's Phobos Grunt mission to Mars that faced technical issues. The technology used in Phobos Grunt was the same used in other lunar projects, including Chandrayaan's lander. When Russia failed to provide the lander even by 2015, India decided to develop its own and used the previous unused Chandrayaan orbiter hardware in Mars orbiter mission. The new date for launch of Chandrayaan 2 was scheduled for March 2018 initially, but was delayed again to April and then to October 2018. But new issues arose that delayed the mission even further. The orbiter was going to carry 8 scientific instruments, 2 of which were improved versions of those flown in Chandrayaan 1. The orbiter high-resolution camera would conduct high-resolution observations of the landing site prior to separation of the lander from the orbiter. The mission's lander was called Vikram, named after the father of Indian space program Vikram Sarabhai. The Vikram lander was supposed to detach from the orbiter and descend to a lower lunar orbit of 30 km by 100 km using 800 Newton liquid main engines. After checking all its onboard systems, it would attempt a soft landing and would deploy the rover. The rover, which was called Pragyan, had a mass of 27 kg. It was going to move on 6 wheels with the speed of 1 cm per second on the moon's land. Eventually, the launch occurred on 22nd July 2019 at 9:13 UTC on the first operational flight for a GSLV Mark 13 M1 vehicle from Satish Dhawan Space Center. After 29 days from its launch and orbiting the Earth in 5 phases, the spacecraft entered the lunar orbit on 20th August 2019 after performing a lunar orbit insertion burn for 28 minutes to 57 seconds. There were 2 landing sites that were selected. The prime landing site was 600 km from the South Pole and alternate landing site was in the west. The prime site was on high plane between the craters Manzinus and Simpelius. After detaching from the orbiter on September 2nd, Vikram began its descent on September 6th and was scheduled to land on the moon at around 2023 UTC. The initial descent was going as planned according to the preset parameters, passing the critical braking procedures, but things started getting bad afterwards. Unfortunately, the lander's trajectory began to deviate at about 2.1 km above the surface. Vikram's final vertical velocity was 58 meter per second or 210 km per hour at 330 meters above the lunar surface, which many experts believed was too fast to perform a successful soft landing.
Planned and the normal performance was observed up to an altitude of 2.1 kilometer. Subsequently, the communication from lander to ground station was lost. The data is being analyzed.
The odds went against the lander, and KC-1 confirmed the failure of the mission by stating it must have been a hard landing.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Though the Vikram lander failed to conduct a soft landing, the story of Chandrayaan did not end there. ISRO, this year in 2023, nearly 5 years after the second Chandrayaan, launched its third lunar exploration and research mission called the Chandrayaan 3 with the main aim to achieve the milestone of soft landing on the lunar surface. From the perspective of time, Chandrayaan 3 took the least number of years than its previous versions, where both Chandrayaan 1 and 2 took about a decade each from getting planned to get made. Chandrayaan 3 was developed in half the time. A few modifications were made in the Chandrayaan, and the orbiter was replaced by a propulsion module with the sole purpose of soft landing. The lander and the rover are the same as they were in the previous mission. Even their names have not been changed from Vikram and Pragyan. Keeping the past in mind, this time changes were made for the improvement of the lander. New guidance and navigation system has been added with more powerful engines. ISRO improved the software as well that will be used to control the lander. With these modifications, ISRO ensured the reduction of any chances of failure from their side. The launch of Chandrayaan 3 was scheduled for 14th July 2023 and took place successfully using LV-M3-M4 rocket from the same Satish Dhawan Space Center from where its two other older versions were launched. The news of Chandrayaan 3 made international headlines, and those nations who once made fun of India's previous space program, Mangalyaan, praised the efforts put in Chandrayaan 3. The Chandrayaan orbited the Earth following the same slingshot method for 17 days, then headed for its journey towards Moon on July 31. On 5th August, it successfully entered the orbit of the Moon. During the period when India's Chandrayaan was orbiting the Moon, another space mission grabbed everyone's attention. Russia's Luna 25 was launched on August 10, 2023 with the same purpose as Chandrayaan, to land softly on the south of the lunar surface. Luna 25 was Russia's first moon mission since the Soviet Union's Luna 24 that took place in the year 1976, and it was expected to land on August 21st. Though the matched dates of these two moon missions were only a mere coincidence, speculations began that India and Russia were competing to reach the South Pole first. But the reality was far different. India and Russia, who were very good allies in the past space programs, showed a great amount of support to each other. On the other hand, both the missions had several differences. The main dissimilarity was with the budget. The estimated budget of Luna 25 was about 1300 to 1600 crore rupees, whereas Chandrayaan's budget was only 615 crore, less than half the amount. Also, Luna 25 was carrying less weight than Chandrayaan as it lacked a rover. The dates of the landing were coming closer. Chandrayaan's Vikram got separated from the propulsion module on 17th August, whereas 2 days later, Luna 25 fired its engines to go into its pre-landing orbit, but it lost communication after 47 minutes. The scientists of Roscosmos tried to revive the communication but failed. Luna 25 reportedly crashed on the lunar surface, demonstrating how difficult it is to land on the southern region of the moon even for a country with a vast experience of space missions. After the crash of Luna 25, Chandrayaan was the only center of attention remaining. A few more days passed as 23rd August, the day of the landing, approached. The next few hours would decide whether this date was going to be written in golden letters or would leave another black spot on the calendar. The descent of Vikram began and it approached the low point of its orbit. All 4 of its engines were fired as a braking maneuver at 30 kilometers above the moon's surface. The live telecast of this event was gaining a high number of viewings on the television and the internet as well. The world was watching. 11.5 minutes after firing the engines, Vikram was only 7.2 kilometers above the surface, maintaining the altitude for 10 seconds. With each passing moment, India was heading towards its dream. Fingers crossed, eyes focused, prayers being chanted, tension ruled over everyone's face. ISRO, which was once known as INCOSPAR, came into existence in 1962 by the combined efforts of Homi Bhabha and Vikram Sarabhai, an organization which started its journey on a bicycle and transported scientific instruments on a bullock cart, but still managed to conduct numerous successful space programs, proving that will and dedication were more important than high budget, was on the edge of creating history by placing its feet on the cold surface of the moon.
लैंडर मॉड्यूल पूरी तरह से सेफली और सॉफ्टली चंद्रमा की सतह पे लैंड हो चुका है। ये हम लोगों के लिए बहुत ही गर्व की बात है। हिंदी में एक कहावत है कि चंदा मामा दूर के, लेकिन अब हम ये कह सकते हैं कि चंदा मामा अपने घर के।
On exactly 12:32 UTC or 6:02 PM, India emerged as the fourth country in the world to conduct a soft landing on the moon when Vikram successfully rested its metal legs on the southern region of the lunar surface. The wait had been ended, and the hard work of ISRO scientists paid off. The control room was filled with joy and relief. Vikram, nearly 384,000 kilometers away from the place of its origin, was standing proudly on the ice-cold soil of Chandrama. After some time, the rover Pragyan started the march on its 6 wheels with a speed of 1 centimeter per second to explore an unknown territory for the advancement of upcoming lunar space missions. The live stream of Vikram's landing broke records as it became the most viewed stream on YouTube with more than 80 lakh live viewers. This achievement of ISRO fueled the motivation of the upcoming generation of space researchers and scientists and carved a solid path for future space programs. One of them is Aditya 1 that would study not moon this time, but the only star of our solar system, the sun.
जब जीरो दिया मेरे भारत ने मेरे भारत ने दुनिया को तब गिनती आई, तारों की भाषा भारत ने दुनिया को पहले सिखलाई। देता न दशमलव भारत तो यूं चांद पे जाना मुश्किल था। धरती और चांद की दूरी का अंदाजा लगाना मुश्किल था। सभ्यता जहां पहले आई, सभ्यता जहां पहले आई, पहले जन्मी है जहां पे कला। अपना भारत वो भारत है जिसके पीछे संसार चला, संसार चला और आगे बढ़ा, यूं आगे बढ़ा बढ़ता ही गया। भगवान करे ये और बढ़े, बढ़ता ही रहे और फूले फले, बढ़ता ही रहे और फूले फले।